Welcome to A Shelter in a Time of Storm. I'm glad that you could be with us for our program today. My name is Roger Comstock. I'm the minister for the Morrison Church of Christ in Morrison, Tennessee. We have some special guests with us today, and if you've seen some of the previous programs, we've been talking with Beth Baker about her book that she has written about the life of and the journey of her family and her son Caleb. Caleb only lived about 9 years in this world. And then I was gone into eternity to be with our Lord. Caleb died from the sort of a combination of the effects of autism and epilepsy and continual seizures and how those seizures affected his body and his stomach problems, respiratory problems, eventually in blood issues as well. And the book is a lot about their journey in, as she has said in the book, trying to put out the fires as those things came up in Caleb's life. I'm happy to have with us today Beth and Chad Baker. They are members of the Maple Hill congregation, the Church of Christ in Paducah, Kentucky. And you all welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And let me just say for our audience, we've done a couple of programs already with Beth, and we really don't have time in this program to go into detail about Caleb's life, but you can get the book. There'll be contact information at the end of the program. But today I'm thankful that Chad and Beth are here together to talk to us. And I told them we really want to talk about today the family dynamic and the marriage dynamic and how the effects of this journey as you went through with Caleb and your whole family in the medical issues and the strains and stresses on a marriage. Chad, first of all, I know I have two sons, and I'm very thankful for those two sons. I've been getting educated because now I have three granddaughters, so it is an education. But as mothers and daughters have a special relationship, mothers and sons have a special relationship. Fathers and daughters have a special relationship, and I'm sure as a father you were anxious. Did you know ahead of time that you were having a boy?
Yes.
And I suspect had you bought him a deer rifle yet, or a ball glove?
When I found out we was having a son, I used to smoke, and we found out in April, or we found out, and I quit in April of '01 before he was born in November of '01.
And you quit smoking. Yeah. Good for
trying
you.
To be,
proud of you.
Trying to be the example I needed to be.
Good for you. Wish more daddies would think that way. And I know it's difficult for you as you probably had, I don't know what your hobbies are, but did you have plans for you and Caleb? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do?
Work most of the time.
Work.
Basketball. Yeah, I look forward to teaching him how to shoot a basketball. And,
there you go.
Just getting out in rough house and just playing.
Being a boy.
Yeah.
We don't have to tell people that you're a Kentucky fan. I don't know if the color of the shirt would give it away, but I know it must be very difficult for you, and seeing what your son is going through as Caleb went through these different treatments and all these different tests and all the procedures that were done for him, and how difficult it must be even now to know that those dreams that you had for you and your son can't be. But you have some very special memories.
Yeah.
Could you all talk a little bit about, we've talked with Beth in a previous program about when you first came to know that there was something not exactly right with Caleb, and in the very beginning of learning that he had autism, and then learning of epilepsy and learning about seizures and his special needs and so forth. Can you share some of what went on between the two of you? How did you, in those early days before things really got really bad? I mean, not like autism is something to take lightly, but how did you all communicate, and how did you all work
for me
as a marriage?
Seems like for me the worse he got, the more I tried to hone in. When autism was the first diagnosis, I was there to try to help, but I wasn't the person I should have been. We've admitted that, and I've told her sorry several times.
But it's good, Chad, it really is good that you can admit that. You know, when we acknowledge our shortcomings, then we can begin to fix them.
I think some of it too, though, on his part was the not really understanding it. I think that was a real big barrier for him. You know, I mean, I could tell him how, you know, okay, well, we're going to try this and see if this will work for him. But he didn't really understand why we were changing something else. And I didn't have time to explain it to him, you know, and so there was a lot of communication issues from us
in the beginning,
early on, that were, you know, and it did put a strain on our relationship.
Sure. And part of it too, somewhat a little bit in your defense, Chad, we guys got to stick together. Somebody had to work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Somebody had to provide an income. I'm guessing that you probably had health insurance through your employer. And so that, you know, and sometimes we kind of lay that aside as mom is there and she's doing the day-to-day routine, but those things that Caleb needed for his health couldn't have been had someone not been providing.
Right.
And so even though daddies are oftentimes removed, and for a lot of times there's a lot of heartbreak in having to be removed.
Sure.
That you can't be there every day and provide the care.
And that's where Aunt Ellen stepped up. And she'd spend a lot of times with her, when he'd been in the hospital. Ellen would stay with Beth and Caleb, and in heart I wanted to be there.
Sure.
But I knew I couldn't miss that much work, and had to feed the other two kids too. So
Sure.
But it all comes just with seeing her, watching how hard she was fighting for him.
Right.
Then I wanted to help her and him.
Right.
So.
And I know that you being the provider for your family through this time, that even though it may not have always come through, but there's a great comfort for Beth.
Sure.
To be able to be home.
Sure.
To provide him the care that he needed.
I was very blessed to be able to be at home with my kids.
Yes,
from the
absolutely.
beginning. I worked for a very short time after Peyton was born, I think for about 8 months, and then we decided we wanted to have more children, and I told him, I said, you know, we're just going to have to fix things to where I can stay home with them.
Good.
And so from, you know, when Caleb was born, I was at home, and I think that was a blessing that I was there with him, so I was a lot more intuitive about what was really going on with him, probably more early on than you know, maybe I would have been if I'd not been at home with him.
Right.
So.
And mamas are typically more in tune to the kids' needs than we daddies anyway.
Sure.
Something the way God made mamas.
Sure. Sure.
Absolutely. And I again, it's not my intention to touch those very tender spots, but you mention in the book, and if we can't go there, you tell me and we'll move along. You mention in the book when you came to the decision, the two of you, to make funeral arrangements. Can you talk about that? Not necessarily the arrangements, but the spiritual aspect of it, if you can,
Sure.
and just emotionally, what it was like to make funeral arrangements for your child.
It was harder for him than it was for me. I basically had to drag him in, I believe. I told him I wasn't going by myself. And my grandfather was a mortician and a member of the church, and it was not foreign to me to be in a funeral home. And I understood, I understood, what was involved in having to go through the process, and so we had great funeral directors to work with.
Great.
And we just I really think we just kind of made a plan and just did preliminary. I mean, you don't have to do everything when you go in to plan a funeral, but just going in and having it done gave us a little bit of peace.
Sure.
So that when that time came, we didn't have that burden to have to deal with all at once. It was a great burden to deal with.
Sure.
Anyway, after he did pass away, there was a lot to have to do and to think about. But you know, picking out a casket is no small task, and you know, it was hurtful.
Sure.
You know,
Sure. Well, you know, it's not. We're not made to think that way.
Sure.
You know, no parent thinks about, you know, someday I may have to pick out my child's casket.
Sure.
We just don't think that way.
You hope to outlive.
Yeah, we think of it being the other way around.
Sure.
We have done some programs previously about funerals and some practical things, and I've tried to encourage and stress to people what a good thing it is to make arrangements. And I know many people who make their own funeral arrangements, but whether you know it's coming or not, and for you all, probably the knowledge that it's coming was probably as difficult as walking in the door of the funeral home.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because we just don't think that way. You talked in the book some about your spiritual life and your worship. From what I gather, there was a lot of time that you couldn't be in the public worship because of Caleb's health and the danger of germs later on as his health kind of began to fall apart. Chad, if you can you talk about that a little bit, about, you know, for you and for you to be, I'm assuming, with your girls, and you have other family there as well. But, you know, and for me as a preacher, I don't get to sit with my wife a lot during the worship, and I value that. And people who have that blessing think that's kind of goofy, kind of silly, but it means something, doesn't it, Chad? When you're loved,
especially if you ever hear her sing. She's got a beautiful voice. So,
would you like? No, I won't put you on the spot.
No.
Yeah, that was hard. It kind of grew to become custom. It wasn't as bad, but then there was times when she did come and I'd sit in her sing next to me. That's the thing I remember the most. That was the hardest part. I mean.
And we had great support as far as, you know, if he was having a good day or, you know, it was nice weather, people would, this is silly, but we put him in his wheelchair and people would take turns strolling him around the cemetery next to the church building.
I see.
They would stroll him around the cemetery and around the church parking lot while we were all in worship, and then when I'd come out, they'd have him ready to go, and we even had members that would do that for us.
She wouldn't get 5 minutes away from him. If she knew she was going to be 5 minutes away, I don't
couldn't
care.
leave it.
I understand. I understand.
Nothing could have drug her away.
And what you said in an earlier program about you literally didn't know from minute to minute when you might be on the way to the hospital or needing an ambulance and so forth. But part of the reason for that, as you said, walking him around in the parking lot and so forth, because it wasn't safe for him to be in crowds of people and so forth.
Right.
And that's certainly understandable. And you know, and you have two beautiful daughters that you had to be concerned not only about their physical well-being, but their spiritual well-being as well.
Sure.
And keeping them, you know, and doing the things that we should do as Christians in our worship and study and so forth.
We've been very blessed too with that. With you know, Chad was either able to go with them or my parents or, you know, my sister or my brothers. They would always step in. You know, even if we were at the hospital or whatever, they would always step in, make sure, you know, that they were at Bible class and that they were at worship. It's hard for us as parents, though. I know. I was raised in the church, and Chad was not, and so you know, being at Bible class, it was important to me that they be there, and Chad felt the same way too. You know, that's where they needed to be, but it's hard for kids to not have their parents at worship with them. You know, and so. You know, we would try to do some Bible study and Bible reading at home, especially during those times. I remember lots of times counting seizures and reading out of the Bible at the same time, you know, and the girls laying there and asking questions, and, you know, you do what you have to do to try to connect with them spiritually.
Right.
And I tried to, him not being raised in the church, I tried to encourage him to talk with them about those things, especially when we were getting to portions of time when we were spending more time with Caleb, and not being able to be at worship with them.
And it's sad. I hear from so many of our older folks when as they age and their health deteriorates, that oftentimes they're no longer physically able to be in the worship of the church. And it's sad that many times it's not until then that people realize the value of our fellowship together and edifying and building up one another and are expressing our gratitude to God. And when we're healthy and everything's fine, we really take it for granted. We don't realize the value of that sharing and that communion, not necessarily the Lord's Supper, but that sharing with one another is so important to our spiritual lives.
Sure.
It is.
And that's one thing spiritually helped me was, we got a great congregation, and a lot of assets, a lot of people, listen. Just if you need to talk for 15 minutes, they'll sit and listen for 15.
Wow, that's great.
But to sit and watch her, her faith never wavered once the whole time. And to sit, like you said, not being able to go to the church on a regular, go to services on a regular basis, that it's hard to keep your faith that strong when you're not around people.
Right.
But she did, and that really helped me a lot.
Can you compare your faith, your conviction prior to knowledge of Caleb's ailments and where it is today? Can you measure that?
I know for me personally, I was raised in the church. I've always, had very strong convictions.
No, the reason I do that is because when we first started dating, she told me pretty much, if you want to see me on a Wednesday night or a Sunday, you're going to go to church with me. Yeah. If you don't go to church, you ain't going to see me.
Right.
Good for you.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
But even just being raised in the church, you have that faith that's ground into your heart, but when you experience having a child with special needs, you pray a whole lot more when you're faced with tough times.
Sure.
And you also pray a lot more when you're grateful for what good times you do have.
Right.
You become a lot more grateful. And when you have good days, you pray a whole lot harder and are a whole lot more. I know my prayer life has changed tremendously.
Sure.
Just because, sometimes when you're at home and you are the shut-in and you're not able to worship, that prayer is the only connector that you have to that. And so I know my prayer life changed tremendously. And heaven became a whole lot more real once we have somebody there.
Yeah. Remember, what did King David say when he lost his son?
His son, sure.
He can't come to me, but I can go to him.
But I can go to him, sure.
And for that, it does change our perspective when somebody so special to us is there.
Sure.
And we know that, and that comfort. I think you quoted in your book, as Jesus said, "Suffer not the little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven." And to know that your child is among those that Jesus named, not specifically named, but mentioned certainly.
Right.
Chad, we in talking earlier, you mentioned some wedding vows, and you mentioned things we say when we make our commitments to one another.
For better and for worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you go there? Is that?
Oh yeah. There were times I'm sure she wanted to knock me out, and sometimes I just wanted to get knocked out. But it's sad to think. Her statistic that she said was 80% of all marriages with special needs kids ends in divorce, and that's sad.
It is sad.
For a dad to walk away, I just can't picture that. I mean, I can understand. I truly understand what they go through, and
That's not to say there aren't times that I wish he'd just walk out that door. You know, I mean, there are sometimes I'm like, you need to get in the car, you know, or, you know, you come to this, you're so stressed about the everyday that just a wrong look or a wrong, I mean.
you can't give up eternity for a day.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
And that's one thing, you know, we say it doesn't matter how bad it gets. We're stuck with each other. We made that commitment. And there's no backing out of that. Right. You know, it doesn't
she's
matter.
She's stuck, I'm blessed.
I just think a lot of people react on that initial emotional choice to say, you know, we're through, and they don't listen to what God tells them to do. And when it comes to marriage, you know, you made that commitment.
Yes.
And you made that vow to God first,
Exactly.
before you made that vow to your partner.
Exactly.
And you know, I know now that our relationship is stronger because we are more committed to helping each other get to see Caleb again.
Yeah.
And that's our ultimate goal. And so, you know, there were rough times. There were terrible rough times. And I will say that a lot of times, you know, when our relationship was really bad, that the biggest help to both of us was to pray about it. And you know, and sometimes we met with a preacher, you know, and talked to him about some of the struggles we were going through. And that was the biggest advice he gave to us was, you know, you need to pray about it. Yeah. And sometimes what you ask for when you pray about your relationship with your spouse is different when you're approaching God about what you really need. Sometimes you need more love on your part, you know, or sometimes you need more strength on your part, or more
and more understanding. There was times, you know, in the beginning, I'd walk in, I'd say something, she'd snap, and of course, you know, then I'd get back. It ended up in a bad way when it wasn't what I'd done. It was just she's having a bad day.
Yeah, it was the situation.
And I think more understanding needs to go in with the love, you know. Yeah. Understand that person's having a bad day, and just because they said something don't mean you got to take it to heart. And it's hard to get to that point at times, especially when you're the kind of person that takes everything to heart. But, you know, that's just, it's something that's got to happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, you know, and what you said about praying together and sharing your prayers with each other and praying for each other, you know, it does something, I believe, it does something to you when you hear someone else mention you in their prayer.
Sure.
And when you as a couple can acknowledge your shortcomings and your weaknesses, you're not acknowledging them to God and asking for help, and in the same breath acknowledging those shortcomings to one another and praying for one another. And it does, I believe it does have an effect on you. When you hear someone else put your name before God, it does. And if you need straightening up, it kind of makes you want to straighten up, you know. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because, you know, probably, you know, in the daily walk of life, we get so wrapped up and so busy, and many times the spiritual things in our prayer lives are the things that really suffer.
And was it, you know, like she was saying, with his magnificent brain, you know, there was times that all you could do was pray. I mean, the medicines didn't seem to want to help, and, you know, diets and everything you tried, you know, everything she could dig up and do, she tried that was within reason. Right. And, you know, sometimes, you know, like we're instructed, we just got to turn our problems and our troubles back to Him, and He'll handle them in a way that needs to be handled. Yeah. So,
I love the account in the book of Isaiah of Hezekiah, and the Assyrian emperor, General Sennacherib, sent him a letter and said, "I've got you like a bird in a cage." And Hezekiah took Sennacherib's letter and laid it at the steps of the temple. Well, he was turning it over to God. And we need to do what we're able to do and capable of doing to the best of our ability, but we sometimes forget that we have a greater power, and being willing to trust Him for those things that are good and right. Because I suspect there were a lot of times in your journey with Caleb and his care that you maybe, I don't know what's right. You know, Lord, lead us the way. And we don't do that real well, you know, a lot of times. We want to take the lead and make it about me rather than allowing the Lord to lead us. And He doesn't do that in miraculous ways, but if we'll let Him, He'll lead us. And providentially, and doors will open, doors will close, and sometimes we just don't listen too well.
Especially if we don't think it's the right answer, you know. I mean, sometimes we're anticipating, you know, that maybe there is, you know, something out there that, you know, that would help him or heal him, but, you know, it was in putting Caleb in God's hands, really, and understanding that this was his life, and it was not for us to continue that battle. It was for him to win heaven. That was the hardest part.
You know, I believe, and I teach it as best I can, a parent's primary purpose in this life, I believe, is to get each other and their children to heaven. And that sometimes gets it goes to the back burner sometimes, sadly. I really appreciate you all being here today and sharing your lives with us, and even some of those tender moments, and appreciate what you've done and your conviction to God and to one another and family. That is very important. As we've been talking about, Beth has written a book about their journey with their family and about Caleb's medical issues. The book is available. There will be some contact information on the screen where you can order the book, and it certainly is well worth your time to read. I've read through it twice, and I probably will read it again. So keep that in mind, and the contact information will be available. We're glad that you could be with us today for our program. We thank you for your attention. We're going to do at least one more program with the Baker family, a little bit different avenue. We're going to talk to Caleb's sisters and his aunt, and I hope that you'll be able to be with us for that program as well. Our contact information for the program is also available if you would like to contact us in any way. We'd appreciate that.